Hi team, I just wanted to talk to you for a minute about hexavalent chromium. So as you know, we recently had an industrial hygienist in the facility to conduct a survey of one employee who was spray painting using our epoxy primer. That primer does contain an ingredient that has hexavalent chromium. So we wanted to look and see what the employee exposure was. And if you'll give me just a second, I'll get to those results. But first, let's talk about what is hexavalent chromium. So hexavalent chromium is a toxic form of chromium metal that's often used in many industrial applications, but primarily for its anti-corrosive properties, which is why we use it in the aerospace industry. Now, it can get into the body by a couple of ways. One is from inhalation of the dust, mist, or fumes that are generated from whatever process that we're doing. So for us, it's the spray painting. It can also have eye or skin contact with liquids or dust containing hexavalent chromium. There are negative health effects that are associated with the overexposure of hexavalent chromium. Those include nasal septum ulcers or perforation, bronchitis or asthma, or worse, lung cancer. So let's talk about what OSHA says about hexavalent chromium, and then let's talk about our industrial hygiene results. So OSHA says that the permissible exposure limit for an employee in an 8-hour time-weighted average is 25 micrograms per cubic meter. So when we look at the sampling that was performed for our one employee doing the spray painting of epoxy primer, we find that his time-weighted average, so over 8 hours, his exposure was 204 micrograms per cubic meter. Now, it should be noted that the sampling only took place for 316 out of the 480 minutes, 480 being an 8-hour day. So we assumed zero exposure for that employee for the remaining 164 minutes. If that employee at any time in those 164 minutes would be exposed to hexavalent chromium, that time-weighted average would go up. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means we're above the permissible exposure limit, so there need to be engineering controls and personal protective measures put in place to ensure that you as the coworker are not overexposed. So one thing that was noted during the survey is that our employee was wearing a full-face negative pressure respirator with a dual cartridge for organic vapor and acid gas, along with a P100 pre-filter. What I need you all to know is that is plenty of protection. That will provide the proper protection to keep you below the permissible exposure limit. However, what we should note is that the acid gas portion of that canister is not necessary. What should be required for this task is the full face negative pressure respirator with an organic vapor cartridge and a P100 pre-filter. To learn more about how to properly care and don and doff for a respirator, that will be discussed in respiratory protection. Some other things that are really important for you to know to avoid adverse health effects. One, hygiene is key. Washing your hands, never eating or drinking when any parts of your hands are contaminated is essential. It's also important that you do not take hexavalent chromium dust anywhere else within the facility or home. So in order to do that, what do? Well, we provide you with protective clothing and PPE. So when you come to work, it is essential that you change from your street clothes into clean protective clothing in the clean side of the locker room and then go to work. When you are completed with work, you need to go into the dirty side of the locker room, take off all of your contaminated protective clothing and PPE and place them in the sealed container. Then you need to rinse off, shower off, and enter into the clean portion of the locker room to don your street clothes and go home. What you don't want to do is take hexavalent chromium dust outside of the workplace. That can impact you and your family members. So please be sure that you follow these requirements. There are additional requirements like proper ventilation, proper use of tools, and it is essential that we maintain all of that equipment utilizing a preventative maintenance schedule to ensure that our equipment is running properly and that we're not creating a scenario where you're overexposed. If you have any questions about hexavalent chromium, please let me know.